All right, we're live. You are on mute, Suzanne.
There we go.
Perfect. There we go. That's how everyone knows it's live.
Awesome.
All right, thanks everyone for joining us here on Getting to Hell Yes. I'm here today with Suzanne Hopson. She's a founder and principal at Here to Elevate. They're a fractional consulting firm for multifamily. I'll pass it to you, Suzanne, to do your intro, and then we'll talk about Getting to Hell Yes.
Yes, thank you so much. That was a good partial intro. I'll give the rest of it. So, I have been in the business on the operator side for over 20 years. I've held just about every position that there is. My last position was as president of TriCap Residential Group out of Chicago. And from there, I decided to open up my own firm. I saw a need out in our space to help small to medium sized businesses grow. And we are able to inject expertise at that level in just about every position. So we have a bench of people, which most of you have seen on our website and on LinkedIn, that can very quickly get into the business, into the trenches, and help our customers grow.
So we talk about your SMB prospects. What does an SMB customer look like and feel like?
Yeah, so our target customer is really the one that is either having operational difficulties, like their pain points are to a point where they need external help, or they are in the process of expanding or growing their business and they need some strategic planning and coaching and assistance in that area. So one is, we're on fire, and the other one is we intend to grow, but we need some assistance in doing that, some expertise in that.
Okay, so then the spirit of Getting to Hell Yes, we'll take on both of those as conversation topics.
Yeah.
We'll do the hair on fire. What, as we were chatting in the pre-call here, people don't like to change. So I've been operating for a while, and things have been pretty smooth and predictable and reliable. Maybe there's some ups, maybe there's some downs, but nonetheless, things have been working pretty reliably. What happens in their business that they go, they acknowledge that their hair is on fire and they got to do something about it?
Well, it's usually one of the key indicators that begins to suffer or make itself known, like the bottom line, your NOI, your expenses are going up. You're not reaching, all of the goals that you've set forth in the business, and the on fire, I think, has really happened as of late because of what we're going through economically. I mean, obviously we're not transacting. And so in this, what I call a down period, people are looking under the lid. They're saying, okay, how are my operations? How are my efficiencies? How can I make this more efficient? How can I save money? My insurance is going up. What else can I do to make this business run better? So I am prepared and ready when the market opens up and I can start transacting again. And so those are usually the calls that we get. Another pain point that causes the hair on fire is not being able to get the right people in the right seats. We have staffing shortages in some of our specialized roles, and so how do you really get those positions filled quickly? I hear about that all the time. Another pain point, our technology costs are going up, and how can we really leverage the technology that we have to be more efficient? They need expertise with their tech stack. So there's a lot of things that, can play a part in this operationally, depending on, the client setup and the client's goals.
So like on the hair and fire side, when often it can be an external event that prompts the commitment to change. So an example might be a meeting with the lender, right? Or they're looking to, let's say the hair and fire where their operating is they're underwater with respect to their performance. But people can live for a while not doing anything. And so an acknowledgement, let's say you're a seasoned operator, things aren't working well, and then you put your hand up, you say, I got to find help. There's a series of steps that happen that someone's got to psychologically go through before they go, I need to find help. And then when they go find help, where do they start? How do they find you?
Yeah, exactly. So I know many of the people that I'm associated with have gone through this very thing on the operator side, where they're not quite sure where in their operations things are starting to falter. And getting an outside perspective is, not only a smart thing to do. Right now, people who have had to lay off key people on their staff, they don't have that expertise at the table anymore. So how do you get that expertise? How they find me, I think, is through our networking. We've got a really solid multifamily network that, and I'll say this, a lot of people are going into consulting during this downtime. So there's a lot of talk and a lot of conversation about how can we really help operators either on a temporary basis or in with them, in the trenches with them until we get them out. But yeah, I mean, that has happened. I've witnessed it firsthand where, we're not able to get the occupancy up. So what do? We bring in marketing help or we bring in training help. Maybe positions that we can't afford to have on full time, we'll just hire that out. And honestly, I think consultants in general, I don't really particularly like the word, but let's just say for the sake of it's a business and industry vertical, that there's sort of this bad connotation that they come in, they give some advice and they go, or they do a specific area of work for a business and then they're gone. I think how we're operating right now and what we're really going to be successful doing on this side of the business is providing ongoing solutions and leading them through this journey, because a lot of this is unknown. Yeah, we've got operators that have been around forever, but we have newer operators and they've not been through a cycle. So having people that have been through that and know how to guide them through that is valuable.
Do you find when you're looking at a pipeline of prospects and you're going to evaluate their probability to close, how do you what questions are you asking? How are you sensing that they're edging towards hell yes versus just shopping around? Like you, I was in consulting for 22 plus years, ran a business, and so many times we were pulled into RFPs or even quotations exercises, just like this procurement gymnastics to try and qualify a pre-existing decision. How do you go about getting the questions that are saying, hey, this is a real deal, we're not being shopped here, and because it's your time, right? Your time is valuable. You either could be billing or generating revenue, and so you've got to make that choice as a service leader, right? And how do you make that? How do you evaluate which prospects are really going to commit the change and buy versus the ones that are just shopping around and getting information?
I'm so glad that you've asked this question, because you are quite right. A lot of time can be wasted. Someone once told me that even the intellectual property within my head is worth something. And that really meant a lot to me. And I began to shift the way that I thought and about the time and how I spent my time with what I would say looky-loos, people who are, getting on the phone with you to basically do a brain drain and get all of your knowledge so that they can take it and implement it. And so to that point, what also would happen, even if they were legitimately looking for some assistance, we never really got to the bottom of what their real needs were because we didn't do it the right way. So for me, the process is really important, and process is one of the key offerings that I give. But for my own process, really doing the due diligence up front, asking the right questions at the very beginning, and not making promises until that due diligence is done has really saved me a lot of time and my potential clients. We begin to trust each other during that 30-day period. We have an opportunity to, again, look under the lid and see what's really happening in the business. It's very hard during a discovery call to discover everything that's really going on in someone's business. If you got 30 days in the trenches with them, you're going to have a pretty good idea of where you need to assist first. I think oftentimes in that discovery call, we don't get to what the owner really needs, and they don't know. They don't really know what they need. They can't ask for it. They just know they're in pain and their hair's on fire. Mm-hmm. So during that 30 days, being able to really identify the key areas to go to work on next, the ones that are going to make the biggest effect and put the hair that's burning out, I think is really valuable. Then you can really, I think, define a great scope. You've got accountabilities that are built in and deliverables that are built in, and you have a little bit of trust now that has been gained by working together in the trenches for that first 30 days. I know that was a long answer, but
No,
Does that?
it's super. I mean, because like I've got this kind of like an emerging. Like I said, I was in consulting forever, and like what's emerging, and then I was like on my own, big firm, small firm, that kind of thing, and like it began to feel like all the IP is kind of like openly available, but like so is also every single like way to lose weight, right? It's like the difference between knowing what to do and how to do it is the price you pay for a consultant. And
Yes.
then I think what you also articulated really well there, it's not what to do, how to do it, it's when to do what. So like, you've got your long list of, I mean, just as you mentioned, in very basic conversations, like, okay, so we need to increase occupancy, increase rent, and we need to reduce OpEx. Those are kind of like three basic things to do in business. But where do you start? How do you start? How do you get that going? Like, and then when you start kicking that off, you get more resistance to change. And so a lot of this podcast, what's emerging about is this people's willingness or unwillingness to change based on the kind of their current circumstances. And
Yep.
like when you introduce change into somebody, and what's interesting about this business, I think that there is an unfair assessment in multifamily single in real estate that it's very they're laggards with respect to technology. But I also come to form the opinion that they didn't need technology before, and so why would they have changed, right? And so like you talk in the technology business, like our business, we're on all these things right away because we have to do that to compete, but that's a different business. And so when we take a look at the business of creating a long-standing building that's going to last 30, 40, 60 years and collecting regular rents on it, that's not that. That's the pretty straightforward analog business, and we're applying technology to an analog business. So I think that it's an unfair assessment of the business saying it hasn't adopted technology because it didn't need technology. There was no problem that the technology that was available that could solve. Now, granted, now we're getting better with respect to marketing, attracting tenants and residents. Looking at how we spend our money, tracking how we're tracking everything. It seems in these buildings right now. So when you take a look at making those assessments, like how do you generally get that feedback, or how do you present that feedback? So you've because you're not, the way I heard it, you're doing your 30-day due diligence. You're still not at hell yes there. You're still at that, okay, let's get some information. You're building a case for change in those
Yeah.
first 30 days. Because you still haven't, if I'm kind of thinking back to my days, you're doing your first little road mapping exercise. Your road mapping is 30-day. You produce it's kind of like the classic consulting deck. Here's your vision. Here's your current state. Here's your your gaps. Here's your fit gaps. Here's what you got to do. Here's your roadmap. And that roadmap is the output from your 30-day exercise. And so you charge for the first part so they can get informed, or maybe it's discounted or whatever, or thrown in or rolled up. But then you don't get your hell yes until you present that story.
Yeah.
So in that period, how are you building up that hell yes?
Yeah. Let's take one step back before we go into due diligence. There is a rules of operating that I propose at the very beginning, which sets the stage for how we're going to work together. And I go over things like core value alignment. I go over things like communication. I go over the things like you have to give up the right to be offended. I go through a lot of things to find out whether or not they're truly ready to be in business with me. And I think the reason for that is I've worked for people that were core value aligned, and I wasn't able to give them what they needed, right? So really understanding that your customer is ready from the get-go is helpful. And during that time where I'm taking them through the journey of what this would look like to the end result, which comes before we go into due diligence, I think that's where I can sense whether or not they're ready to pull the trigger. Their commitment to a 30-day due diligence is all up front. So I charge for the entire 30 hours all up front.
Yeah.
So I know right then that they are also committed to at least that, and they'll get a great product for that. They will get a due diligence, next steps, all of that, which can be taken anywhere if they so chose. But that hasn't happened. What's happened is, oh, wow, I didn't realize that. This makes sense. How will we know if we're on track, off track? And we outline all of that. we also measure it quarterly. So even if we have a year contract, we're measuring the results continuously. So we're always on the same page. And we don't just help people with the surface things that are the end result of what's going bad in the company. We dig in, which is, what I stand for. Is your vision on point? Do you have the right people in every seat? We go through all that.
Mhm.
And then, are you executing? Because you can have all of the first two things and not execute, which then doesn't get to the result. And I'll just add to this. The reason why we go in that deep is because you could put a Band-Aid on something like, we just fixed your occupancy. But and this goes to our reputation too, how are you going to sustain that if you don't have the right people in the organization? You're constantly having to hire consultants to come in and help
Sure.
you. So
I always felt like as a consultant, like there's kind of two. I mean, I guess I'm somewhat opinionated, but that's natural. I kind of ended up with like this perspective that there's two types of consultants in the world out there today. And really, I mean, this is really black and white. So I will offend. There's the consultant that wants to work themselves out of a job, and there's a consultant that wants to be there forever.
yeah, I think
Right?
you're right. I don't think that's off. And let me rephrase, because there's a lot of different services out there that provide great services for our clients. But we are very specific on what we do. So we might be a C-suite executive expert in the seat, actually have people accountable to us. That's a different type of service than, let's say, our consultancy business, which we also offer, which is a project, right? It has a start, has a finish, it has deliverables. And then we also do coaching and advising. So that's really the third service. And so if you're clear about that and you're able to get to what the client really needs, that automatically, I think, helps the whole transaction, because sometimes they don't know. They don't know yet.
With things like occupancy that move slow, like I've always had this kind of like this bimodal thinking to kind of like fast and slow. Like, how do you initiate momentum for things that are slow moving?
Yeah. Well, it depends on the level of risk and what you're going to pay for speed. So, for example, some owners do not want to wait for higher occupancy. What are they willing to give up to get there? And the reason is they might have to have a certain occupancy threshold to refinance their property.
Mm-hmm.
So they may be willing to take a hit, in another area of the business to get their occupancy up. There's just a million different scenarios to that. And I don't know exactly if that answers your question, but yeah.
Well, in a little bit. I mean, in terms of like you spoke a little bit of how it's about establishing the measurement systems in place so that you can create commitment to change and reinforce that commitment to change. And so I'm often thinking about, okay, so for us as an example, we're a software business. We track usage, and usage is pretty much translates to value. Like that's it's a one-to-one. It's very linear, right? So the more you use our product, the more you use Iris, the more money you save. That's just the way it works. And so we have an exercise where we deploy, we call Trumpet. So you go live on Iris, there's the training and there's the onboarding, that thing. Once you're rolling, we do Trumpets. So every week it's like reinforcing the change. So, hey, congratulations, so-and-so, Suzanne, you did, 25 sessions last week. You got 14 10 out of 10s. You got 6 thank you notes, like all that kind of psychological reinforcement. And then so that's kind of the first, that happens every single week. And then we've got retrospectives. So we'll go meet the customer and their people, and we'll have them fill out a box. We're pretty deliberate about 4 boxes. We call it the 4 L's. What did you learn? What did you love? What did you loathe? What did you long for? Right. And we really want to have that open box about loathe, because that's the gold, right? Because they will tell you, people are so nice, but that be nice can often kill you in a delivery role, because you don't hear what you need to fix. And so we kind of prompt them with the loathe, and then we have a QBR, like most businesses do, like you explained the QBR as well. Quarterly business review, we'll review everything and kind of play back to the vision and why they bought in the very beginning. But we have the benefit of having that early indicator. Like the day you sign on, the first time someone uses it, we can kind of go, okay, here's your early indicator of success. and we're
Yeah.
going to kind of reinforce that behavior. So in your business, in the consulting side of things, once you establish the fix that needs to be fixed and you deploy, how do you typically maintain that momentum for change so you can kind of like get the flywheel going and move on to the bigger change?
Yeah, well, it is by prioritizing what you're going to work on first and what's going to make the biggest impact, what the owner wants to make the biggest impact. If it's occupancy, then there are things that we've outlined, right, as priorities, and then the drivers for those priorities to get to the goal. So it's about goal setting. It's about, by the end of the quarter, we want to be at this occupancy. We work backwards from there. Oftentimes, the trip up is in prioritizing where you're going to go to work first. And then what are the drivers for that change? It could be something like hiring a new person or bringing in training, or it could be a thousand things. But getting to that goal and incrementally measuring it weekly, to your point, it keeps you on track or off track. And it gives you the ability then to make those suggestions to the client of what changes still need to be made. And that's what we do. I mean, it's really based on the entire business plan. Occupancy may be one thing. We may have 5 initiatives that we're working on with a client. So,
and then you roadmap them up and you knock the pins down as you kind of go through.
yeah, I mean, ultimately, we're setting the goals at the beginning, but if we're with them long term, those goals might change depending on what's happening to the business and what deciding to take it in.
One of my favorite kind of like, it's almost cringeworthy moments in consulting is like when you've kind of articulated the current state and they've articulated their vision statement, and you ask the question, like, how are you going to get there with what you have today? And you just wait. Like the desire for a consultant to get in there and start talking about the answers can be overwhelming. But there's nothing more powerful than that pause of just waiting for them to answer the question that they've always known they needed to answer, but never really were asked that answer. And this is kind of why it's like, it's often external, that it's like, people go lose weight because there's a wedding coming up or a reunion. It's like that external influence that forces them to commit to change. And they emerge as that hell yes. Is this, okay, I need to go get from whatever our NOI is right now to a different level, or we want to grow by, we want to go from 500 units to 1,000 units or 1,000 to 2,000 or whatever, because we've got this mandate. And you ask the question, how are you going to get there? And they go, I don't know.
Yeah.
And then that I don't know questions when you go, okay, let's dig in.
Totally. And even stretching that a bit, what if we could do this? Is your goal big enough? Oftentimes you'll have a visionary, I'll just use that terminology, that has a goal, but it's not the stretch goal. It's not the goal that they could really achieve if they had everything in place, the right way. And so there's we do that too. Like, what would your world look like if all these things that you want today were happening? Would you ultimately take care of those pain points? Like, I need more time with my family. I'm working too much in the business. I want to grow the business and I can't get out of the weeds. There's a lot of things that our clients in particular say over and over and over again. And those are a lot of those things. And so they're so stuck in it. They don't know how to get there, and they really want to get there. And that's where we come in. You're right. It's the pause. It's the pause.
Have you ever had to fire a customer?
Yes.
How'd that go?
Without
naming names, obviously, but just, how did that go?
Yeah.
How long did it, actually better position. How long did it take you to figure out you had to commit to change and fire that customer?
So I'm going to say that, this is part of the road rash that I talk about, where I probably could have done things a little bit differently. And it was because I'm new to this. And that was not setting up the rules of engagement at the beginning. That came from not being on the same page about communication and decision making. And so when you don't have those rules of engagement really set and you're committed to that and you're committed to feedback and that type of, core value alignment, you may discover something down the line that is, ethically not cool, right? And you can't be a part of that. There's also visibility. There's been a time where I didn't have true transparency, but was in a role where I had to be accountable for that transparency. And so that is not, I can't be successful. My brand can't be, my business and my brand can't be successful if we're not following the rules of engagement. So yeah, you know what? It always ends up well. I mean, we're just not a fit, and that's okay.
Mhm. Mhm. It is interesting because, like, I think that you're seeing a lot of customers and also vendor partners, particularly, like, it's been such a short period of time and such an extreme change with this with respect to the zero interest rate period into where we are today. And so many buying priorities changed, and so much behavior has changed. Like,
Mhm.
the people in the seats have changed. And it's really become really interesting to have these conversations about fit and
Mhm.
knowing what are best in the world at, and knowing what the customer is trying to achieve. And I really do like your point earlier about can we be in a position to offend? I mean, obviously we're not going to offend you, but we're going to be blunt. Midwestern bluntness is a beautiful thing, right?
Mhm.
Is it Missouri that's a show me state? Like, or Mississippi, it's like, show me, right? And I want to see it, and I'm not going to be swayed by uh, pixie dust and unicorns. I really want to get to the point here, right?
Mhm.
And I find that in some cases where we've sold to friends or relationships, those conversations get even more complicated, because
Mhm.
it's like there's a conflict between the bluntness that's required for the situation and the tenderness that may pre-exist from the relationship. And
Mhm.
particularly if you've got long-standing customers, it's if you don't have that bluntness established at the very beginning, it's exceptionally difficult as the bluntness established as a code of conduct. Then
Mhm.
it's very difficult to do your job.
Yeah. Yeah, and ultimately you won't be able to do a good job for the client. And if that's the ultimate goal, sometimes that lack of fit will prevent that from happening. So,
Yep.
yeah, why engage that? I'm not in the business of stealing people's money. I'm not going to do that. So, that's what it would feel like to me.
Yep.
And that's okay. They'll find someone that's a better fit for them, and I'm okay with that.
Yep. So then for those that are listening, we've got about 4 minutes here to wrap up. In respect to getting to hell yes. So this is what I've heard, correct me, is that you have a really good process of identifying early on, even prior to the initial engagement, what is their level of commitment to change. What's the hair on fire. We didn't get a chance to talk about the ones that are looking to grow. We'll have maybe another conversation on that. But like the blockers that are in place to prevent them from performing, or that's preventing their hair from going out, and you kind of sense for that at the very beginning, and you seek an agreement on code of conduct at the very beginning. Tell me if I'm right, if I heard wrong. And then you go into your period of time where you go, in a sense, assess what's the scope of what change needs to be made. And then there's kind of like that 30-day presentation of roadmap. And from that roadmap going forward. And so there probably is cases where people drop off after that roadmap presentation. And that's okay. That's business.
Yeah. Yeah, and we have
Yeah.
a guarantee too. So that's the other thing I think is really important, and that, you know, sometimes is hard to bank on. And so it as long as the client is going in knowing the rules of the game, the rules of engagement, but also has the comfort of knowing that we're going to do what we say we're going to do, we're going to execute. And if it's not to their satisfaction, if they've followed all of our consulting tips, then we will refund their money.
Hmm.
So, or we'll make it right. And so
Yeah.
I think that the good old guarantee is it needs to be brushed off and brought back on some other levels of business that
Mhm.
it goes a long way.
Well, it's interesting, especially in the consulting world, because like the whole thing of what am I buying is always a bit fluid. And so like the consulting firms that come together with a methodology with respect to what this client engagement is going to feel like and look like, I always found we could charge more and faster, right? We said, here's what you're buying. Here's the 5 chevrons across the top. This is what it all breaks down like. And this is what we're going to do. And then you go do that again. Then you go do that, then you go tell them that you're doing that. And then you go play back and tell them what you did, all along those, like, whatever, 5 chevrons across the top. And then it's easier for them to comprehend the change that they're going to be absorbing. So then
also, to that point, I think it's better to, package what you are providing as a deliverable instead of like a rate. I think people get stuck on that too.
Oh yeah.
The world's going to deliverables, and that's where the client is really, that's where the value is, not in, what did you do within that hour?
I wrote an article 2017, I think, or 16, about like, let's stop measuring utilization. And it was a big, long ramble. I thought it was brilliant, but actually what was funny about it is I got feedback even as recent as like last year from people who found it. They're like, we're changing our consulting company because of this. And I was like, don't do that. Careful.
They're going to come after you.
Yeah, no kidding. That is without prejudice, without guarantee. So, what is the one piece of advice that you give other sellers when they're trying to recognize those key moments? They're trying to find that hell yes.
I know this is an old adage, and I consider myself a solution provider, not necessarily a seller. I guess I am, but you listen, make sure that your products actually match what they're looking for. And if they don't know what they're looking for, help them to figure that out before you enter into a large contract. It's all about listening. It's really just listening very carefully to what they want instead of thinking about landing the deal.
Yeah,
But the deal will land. It will land. I promise you, if you are really a solution provider. The other thing I would give as a tip is, just because you are, in a relationship at the beginning with someone and you're not in contract, doesn't mean you can't help them. You add value all along the way. And when they do come to that buying moment, they're going to think of you because you actually gave them some things that, you didn't charge for.
Yeah, a really good adage was given to me or shared with me was that helping sells and selling never helps. So wonderful. Anyone we should talk to? Any ideas that come to mind?
Oh, you mean for the next
show? Yeah.
Oh goodness. Oh my gosh, there's so many. Christy Fickert would be a good one. She has, I think, really nicely blended what she does without really selling anything. And yet she's extremely effective. So she'd be a great one.
All right. Well,
she's busy. Her dance card's pretty full, but she would be a good one.
I'll reach out to her. You've been put on notice.
Awesome.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Suzanne. Thank you everyone for listening in. Again, the live will be live on LinkedIn all the time. This will convert to a podcast, Getting Hell Yes. It's on Apple, Spotify, and other places where you listen to podcasts. We've got some back shows there. Love to get your feedback on those. Add any comments and subscribe. Thanks, everyone. And thank you, Suzanne, very much for your insight. I really appreciate it. And I think my takeaway is setting those code of conduct up front so you have permission to be effective.
I love it. Thanks
all
for
right. Thank you so much. Okay. Take care.
Bye.